Hello beautiful people, my name is Ashley and I'm the creator of Rekindled Kindle. You clicked on this video, you're interested in my review of some soy waxes. So today I'm going to be talking about 3 soy waxes that I've experienced. Golden Brands 464, 444, 415, and C3. So that's the Cargill C-3. I've experienced all of these waxes over the last year, so I just wanted to give you all my feedback and my experience working with each of these waxes. I'm going to start with Golden Brands 464. This was the first wax that I ever worked with. It's also the most popular wax among the candle making community. So if you're interested in working with soy wax, it's often the wax that people recommend the most. As a soy wax user, it's also a wax that I really enjoyed working with, but it can be very temperamental. What do I mean by this? When I worked with this wax, I had really difficult glass adhesion. So that means while I was working with it, I would get a lot of glass separation. So you would see the space in between the wax and the glass. And it's not something that's an extremely big deal, but it is pretty frustrating. In addition to that, the top layer of the wax often had many sinkholes, but super easy to fix. If you have a heat gun, you just heat up the tops. You can poke holes as well, and those imperfections tend to go away. And another thing that I experienced was light frosting, but these are all cosmetic. They're all issues with the aesthetics. The wax itself, it gave wonderful hot throw, it gave great cold throw, and it traveled pretty well in the summer. So 464 is a wax that I tried out in the summer because the wax that I use now, which I'll talk about in a little bit, does not perform well in the summer. It has a much lower melt point than the other waxes. All of the waxes, the soy waxes that I'm going to talk about, their fragrance load is anywhere from 6 to 11%, and in terms of hot throw, they all performed pretty well. I know a lot of people experience issues with hot throw, but that's not something that I experienced with any of the soy waxes that I used. I'm not sure if the issue is curing, because I tend to let my candles cure for a pretty long time, and they turn out fine. But I did really enjoy 464, and if I had to give it a rating, it is likely that I would rate it a 7 out of 10. What would give it a 10 out of 10 is if it had smoother tops and I didn't have issues with glass adhesion. Like, I had no trouble wicking that wax with my fragrance oil. And like I said, there was no issues with hot throw or cold throw. It was a really great wax. The second wax that I started using was Golden Brands 415, and that is also the wax that I am currently using. It is likely my favorite wax, and it is also the wax that does not perform well in the summer. So I often use another wax, which is another one that I'm going to talk about later on. So Golden Brands 415 performs the best for me. It has the lowest melt point of all the waxes I've ever used. I think it melts at about 115 maybe. So when it's time to pour the wax into the candle jars, I pour at 100 degrees. Oftentimes I can also pour at about 95. And if you look at wax at 95 degrees, it's often really chunky. Like, it's like this opaque color, and you can start seeing it solidifying. But if you do not pour it at this point, you'll get so many sinkholes. If you pour it while it's still too liquidy, you'll notice that the tops of your wax look awful. So it's best to wait until it's really like almost chunky, like an ice cream, like, you know, warm ice cream, like that consistency before you pour it. and then you'll get smooth tops every single time. I love that wax because it has great glass adhesion. Like, I rarely have separation issues with that wax from my jars. There's one right here, if you take a look. I think it performed pretty well. And then there's also one right here. I think it performs pretty well. Like, if you look, there's no separation. It works really nicely. I've been using that wax for anywhere from 6 to 8 months now, and I genuinely enjoy how it performs. But the downside is it is not a summer wax. If I tried to ship that wax in the summer, it would definitely melt. So I use a different wax in the summer, which is a wax that I'm going to talk about later on. The third wax that I'm reviewing, before I move on to the third wax, if I had to rate Golden Brand's 415, it is likely that I would give it a 9 out of a 10. What would make it 10 out of a 10 is if the melt point was much higher. You know, if it was a wax that I could use year round because the melt point was there, it would get a 10 out of 10 hands down. It has great hot throw, great cold throw, great glass adhesion. It's easy to wick. I love it. And finally, the third wax that I'm reviewing is Golden Brand's 444. This was my first summer wax, the wax that I used last summer. This summer I'm using a different wax, and that's going to be the last wax that I review. So Golden Brand's 444 is also a great wax. Great hot throw, great cold throw. With soy wax, the only issue that you have with hot and cold throw is if you don't let them cure long enough. Typically, after a day or two, you can get a pretty good cold throw. After 3 days, you can get a decent hot throw, but you want to wait the full 2 weeks to really get the hot throw that you're looking for and that you want your customers to have. If you can wait even longer, that's great. But you need at least 2 weeks to really get these waxes at their best. With Golden Brand's 444, I chose it as my summer wax because it had a higher melt point and a higher fragrance load. So this is the wax that could hold 11% fragrance oil. And in the beginning, I was fragrance oil happy. I was like, oh, it holds 11%. I'm going to use all 11%. These days, I stick to around 8.5%, 9%, and somewhere in between those two percentages because I think I've gotten down fragrance in my wax at this point. But I used 444, like I said, because it had a much higher melt point. It was easier to ship in the summers, and it was less likely to melt. Although I did experience some melting, it wasn't nearly as bad as with 415. Like, there would be some sweat. I want to say, I'm calling it sweat, but of course it's likely fragrance oil or the wax a little producing a little droplets, but it wasn't as bad as the 415 that was literally melting, like visibly melting. So I enjoyed the 444 for its high melt point. Just like 415 and 464, I didn't have any issues wicking it. For Golden Brand's 415 typically wicked higher, and that's something that the guides tell you. So if you look on manufacturing websites like Candle Science, The Flaming Candle, and look through their wick guides, it'll tell you that 415 typically wicks higher than 464. And that was the case. So it tended to wick one up, which was perfectly fine. It was something that I learned very quickly and made that transition. 444 is also a really great wax because of the fact that it had no issues with the tops. Like, I didn't really see much sinking when I poured at the right temperature, but I also did have slight glass adhesion issues with 444. So that was an issue that I had with 464 and 444. There was a point in time where I would use a majority of 464 and blend in a little bit of 444 because I wanted that that higher melt, not that higher melt, that higher fragrance load. But it's something that I stopped doing really quickly because the glass adhesion was really bad. I'm gonna insert a picture so I can show you one of the candles that I made with the blend, so you can see how it looks. It was a mixture that I had in my fall scent collection, and at that point I was like, okay, it's time to switch back to 415, and I've been using 415 ever since. But like I said, I am trying out a new summer wax. I've been testing it and I think I really enjoy it. So this wax is the Cargill C-3. In the beginning, I was very skeptical of this wax because of Cargill as a company. But after doing my research, I know that a lot of their sustainability practices have changed because of the pressures of the community. And I wanted to make sure I said that in the beginning, because I don't ever want to use a brand that doesn't align with my stance, my passion for sustainability. So the fact that they are becoming a sustainable brand really impacted my want to change. My experience with C3 so far has been amazing. I haven't had any issues at all. Like, everything that I liked about the individual golden brands, I find all in one. Like, I don't want to jinx it, you know? It feels like it's too good to be true. In wicking, I typically use Wicks. I've used Wicks with all of the golden brands. Even though they recommend CD wicks, I find that Wicks perform better for me in my fragrance oil blends and in my wax blends when I was blending waxes. But in using C3 now, I'm going to try the CD wicks again, which is the #1 recommended wicks for the golden brands. But I'm going to try the CD wicks and see how they perform with the C3. I have been using Eco right now, and the Eco wicks burn okay. I'm gonna go ahead and grab one of my testers that I've had and show you all what they look like. Okay, if you take a look at this candle, it is one of my spring scents, Plant Lady. If you look, the burn was actually pretty good for my first time ever wicking C3. This is an Eco 12 wick, and the diameter on this jar is just about 3 inches. So it seems, based on the burn, that I would need to wick up, but that might be a little bit too hot based on how much wax is around the rim. So if the rim was a lot thicker, I would be more likely to wick up. But because of the fact that there's not much wax around the rim, it is very likely that I will double wick with Eco 1s or Eco 2s and see how that burn is. Because I know that based on looking on how much wax, I don't know if you all can see that. Based on looking at how much wax is inside there, I know that it would burn a little bit too hot for my liking. And with the burn now, the jar doesn't get too hot. So if I left it like this, I don't love the burn. There's still wax and residue around the side, and I want to make sure I get all that wax melted. There is a little bit more burning left to do, so we can see how the wax melts at the bottom. But as of right now, I think I want to double wick this jar. We will see. Back to the wax. C3 had a great hot throw. It had a great cold throw. And it wasn't so far it hasn't been very hard to wick. Based on the jar that I showed you, the Eco 12 is not the best wick for that jar, but it would work fine. I am going to go ahead and try wicking it with Eco 1s and Eco 2s and see how that works. I can also create a future video on how I wick candles and how I determine the best wick for my candles, but that's something that I can do in the future. As for the wax, great hot throw, great cold throw, smooth tops. Like that, the pour temp for that wax, unlike my 415, is 165 degrees. So you heat the wax, you add the fragrance oil, and then it's essentially time to pour. So in working with this wax, it saves so much time, because in working with Golden Brand's 415, you heat that wax, you add the fragrance oil, and then you have to wait around 20 to 30 minutes before you pour it, because you're waiting for it to get down to 100 degrees, which can take some time, especially between batches. You know, it's very time consuming. But with the C3, you pour the fragrance oil, it's down to 165, you pour it into your candles, and then it's time to move on to another fragrance, another batch. So it does save time in that sense. So I'm hoping that it's a wax that works out long term, because I wouldn't have to go back and forth between a summer and a fall/winter wax, which would be nice. So if I had to rate the C3, it is very likely that if it continues performing the way it does for me now, that I would give it a 10 out of 10, especially if Cargill as a company keeps making their efforts in sustainability. It's definitely a wax that I would like to stick to, but that's definitely something that I will keep myself updated on as I continue using the wax. So overall, my experience with soy wax has been really good. All of the soy waxes that I've used have had their positives and have had their negatives, ranging from glass adhesion to sinkholes and the pouring temperatures. Like some pour hotter, some pour cooler. But overall, I really enjoy working with soy wax. It's definitely a wax that I would like to stick with. The burn has always been great. I've always had great hot throw, great cold throw, and my customers seem to like it. And what I really want is a wax that burns well and that my customers enjoy. And that seems to be soy wax. So my hope is to continue to learn soy waxes. I know that there are a couple more out there that I would like to work with and maybe review as I become better working with them, and let you all know my experience with them, because I would like to say that I found the perfect soy wax for me, because with everyone, we're all going to have different experience with waxes, and I want to make sure that I find the best soy wax for me. And as I continue working with each of these waxes, I find better soy waxes. And that goes to show my experience working with these four soy waxes. I did really enjoy working with Golden Brands, and I'm hoping that I can go back to 415, because it is genuinely a wax that I love. I know how it performs. I know its temperament, and it's definitely something that I can work with if need be, but I'm also always looking for better. And as candle makers, we should always be looking for better, the best burn for our customers, and the best performance in heat and shipping and all that great stuff. So that is my review of all of the 4 soy waxes that I've experienced as a candle maker. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like, thumbs up, leave me a comment below on your experience working with soy waxes and maybe what videos you'd like to see in the future. If you really enjoyed this video and you want to stick around, go ahead and give me a subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.